There is drag racing and drag racing. This can only be described as a pastime for beauty-conscious folk out to improve their complexion with a mud bath. All you need is a strange-looking mechanical monster, give it a name such as Axle Cruncher, Scrub Cat, Mighty Might or even Rubber Baby Buggy Bumper, have no fear of copping mud in the eye and a fair degree of adventure. Once you possess the necessary tools, make your way to the starting gates and hang on. Early favourites are Mighty Might and Axle Cruncher from Port Macquarie and Moree respectively, but the sole Hunter Valley entry Ian Preslin's Spitfire will be hard to toss if last year's form is any indication. As well as the mud buggies, the dune buggies leave the sandhills for the New South Wales Stadium Championships on a course which includes 4 jumps on the infield as well as the main track. Local drivers Neil Harris, Warren Lampkin, Vince Blanche and current club champion Warren Upton seem certain to fight out the title.
Seven high schools entered the round robin in 2 pools, playing at Islington and Hawkins Ovals today. And pools was the operative word, with both grounds saturated and the play affected by the blustery southerly wind. Cup holder for several years, St Peter's Maitland, was knocked out in a semi-final by St Catherine's from Singleton. But in this afternoon's final at Hawkins Oval, St Mary's kicked 4 goals to 26 to 1 goal to 8 points. St Mary's Year 10 team will now represent the region's Catholic high schools in a statewide knockout competition.
Even bathed in bright sunshine, the inadequacies of the Scone racecourse are apparent. It may be the horse capital of the nation, but as far as facilities go, it's a definite also-ran. That's all set to change, though, thanks to a new equine centre. Minister for Sport Bob Rowland-Smith says will finally do Scone's reputation some justice.
No question about that. We're currently at the Scone racecourse, which is not the best, and I believe it's absolutely essential that this area gets an uplift, not only with the racecourse but also with other facilities, because this is the heart of the thoroughbred breeding area of New South Wales, and so they certainly deserve a lot more than they have.
Still, it was the Cup that was on everyone's mind. Even those more interested in the fashion stakes were keen to bite the bookies in the big one. What do you think might win the main race today?
What do I think might win the main race? I think the top weight, quite frankly.
French Horn? Mummy's Girl.
I like French Horn.
But Lady Luck wasn't doing her own gender any favours.
200 left to run and late news on the outside has swept up to give the lead from Glenbourne Sounds forward. Down the outside, Karingai to the front unbeaten Mummy's Girl from a long way back. The leader late news got away. In second place coming home Mummy's Girl and Glenbourne. But it's right in front near the line late news, and late news is too good.
The winner paid a handsome $14.50 for the win and $3.90 for a place. Mummy's Girl paid $2.60 and Glenbourne returned just $1.50. The bookies were cheering, but so too was the racing public. Bruce Mackenzie, NBN News.
In today's first heat, Gary James gave Merewether a flying start with quick, solid surfing and set up a 3-point gap on Avoca's Quinton Fife. Former Avoca surfer Shane Powell's first ride was a ripper, using all his experience to gain maximum points for the Merewether connection. Just one of the star-studded defending champions, Powell increased the local team's lead to 5 after 2 surfers. Then the world's number 13 ranked surfer Nicky Wood hit the water against fellow touring professional Mark Sainsbury. But it was to be a contrast in the end result. Wood chose to use his first wave as the double whammy, a ride for double points, and it was a Wood classic. Caught from way out, the lad who grew up in this surf used his brilliance to ride it all the way to the beach for a high-scoring ride. For Sainsbury, it will be a day he will want to forget quickly, as the more he tried for the big ride, the more he came unstuck, with plenty of wipeouts the result. With Merewether ahead by 13, Jamie Lambert's job was to grab 4 quick waves, and he did as he was asked to again have the home team in an unassailable lead. To finish off the first heat for Merewether, Simon Law was his usual accomplished self, with smooth lines and, if anything, surfed within himself to give Merewether the first heat 83-66. Heat 2 was a lot closer in the beginning, with Chad Edser getting a 2-point break over Kelly Newman of Avoca, and Dave MacArthur increased that lead by a point with the sustained effort against Clayton Barr. But Merewether produced another big gun in Luke Egan, and he butchered the surf to carve out a comfortable lead. Like Wood in the first heat, Egan used his first wave as the double whammy, and from there on the contest was a non-event. Egan blitzed Adam Leslie to see Merewether lead by 15 points, and then Terry McKenna grabbed a little tube close to the beach to stretch the home team's lead even further. And another touring pro finished off the boys from the Central Coast. Matt Hoy looked strong from the outset, and he surfed superbly to see Merewether win Heat 2, 103 points to 80, and advance to the second round. Touted as one of the best junior sides ever seen, the Knights SG ball team knocked up scoring points today against an Eastern Suburbs team that's going about as good as their seniors. Brendan Pomery, a giant of a lad, crashed over for an early try for the Knights, and then Stephen Trower scored a simple 4-pointer from dummy half. The football was brilliant to watch as it went through a number of hands out along the back line, and finally the movement broke down in a scoring position. But they made amends a couple of minutes later when Bradley got the ball onto Patterson, who moved the ball quickly to the flash Patrick Nandy. He took off down the touchline, beat a tackle or two, before doing well to get the ball back inside to Patterson, and he did the rest for a great try. Gary Sainsbury showed how easy it was to pick up points by grabbing an intercept and racing 40 metres to touchdown under the posts, continuing the domination of the Red and Blues. Meanwhile, at the National Park netball courts, BHP Newcastle proved too strong for the visiting Karingai State League team and ran out winners 45 goals to 35. Goal shooter Rachel Long and her partner goal attack Sandra Landrigan were in brilliant touch early and were well supported by Cassie Mowbray and centre Jenny Donaldson. Newcastle opened up a good break in the first quarter and led 15-9 at the break. They stretched their lead to 9 before Karingai hit back, with Lyndall Jesse and Amanda Gratsich doing the damage. But heavy, tight defence by Joanne Bora and Leanne Donoghue for Newcastle enabled them to skip away to an 8-goal lead at half-time. Karingai played a superb third quarter to narrow their gap to only 5, with their attacking game lifting markedly. However, the Newcastle girls were stung into action and sprinted home to run out comfortable winners in the end 45-35, and now have a 2-win, 2-loss record in the 4 matches they have played so far in the State League. With storm clouds threatening Townsend Oval, it was essential to get points on the board early, and it was the Lions who made the best of an opportunity created by centre Peter Parr. He grubber kicked into the in-goal, and it was just towed away before Winkler could dive on it for the try. But it was Lakes who crossed for the first try of the match in the 23rd minute of the first half, when Brian Quinton, showing all his Winfield Cup experience, received the ball wide out. He broke one tackle and raced in to score, improving his position for his kicker as he crossed the line. Then just before half-time, Souths hit back, and it was the little half-back Brad Guy who made the most of the good lead-up work, and it was 8-6 in favour of Souths at half-time. Peter Walsh kicked a penalty for Lakes United to make it 8-all, and Souths fullback Jason McPhail turned on the razzle-dazzle to bring the frozen crowd to life. Brett Winkler put Souths in front with a penalty goal, and then the deadlock was well and truly broken. Parr tried another grubber kick, and somehow Souths were able to regather. It was flung high and handsome out to the backs where Tony Amity got hold of the leather. He drew the defence, and looming up on the inside was Steve Hoppy. Amity heard the call and gave a great pass to his lock, who did the rest, and the Lions led by 8 after a magnificent conversion by Winkler. But Lakes weren't done and finished off with one of the tries of the season. Quinton made the initial space down the left-hand touchline and slipped a pass back in towards the middle. A succession of hands saw the ball with Sullivan. He offloaded to Grant, who found Brownies outside, and the young winger was brilliant as he swerved his way to the line to score an amazing 4-pointer. But it was all to no avail as Souths were home by 4 points. The Newcastle representative players felt the pinch in the early stages of the match after playing a full round of the domestic competition yesterday, and the Illawarra side had plenty of willing runners. Mike Partridge showed some classy work in defence for the visitors and was able to get his team heading in the right direction on more than one occasion. Newcastle led by 13 points at quarter time and stretched that lead to 3 goals at the long break. With Robert Sansom doing the damage up front and Troy Luff shifted to his more familiar role of centre-half forward, Newcastle powered away in the second half to lead by 43 points at the last change and ran out strong winners in the end by 62 points, and things look good for the country titles.
Many people drive past this hostel in Hannell Street every day, but few know of the work inside. Each night the salvos play host here to 22 homeless men, many on Skid Row. For them, the only alternative is to sleep outdoors and brave the chilly nights. The hostel is also a proclaimed place, which means that intoxicated men can dry out under special care, instead of spending the night in a police lockup. The Lord Mayor and Town Clerk were among special guests invited to inspect the facility. Breakfast was prepared in the hostel kitchen, which in the 8 days after the earthquake cooked 6,000 meals for emergency workers. Although funded jointly by state and federal governments, that money falls short of the amount needed to maintain the 15 staff on call around the clock.
The overall costing is certainly far greater than what we raise in this area here, and it just catches up on the deficit, and thereby we're able to keep the work going in the area.
The Red Shield appeal door knock on Sunday hopes to raise $400,000, although more than $2 million is spent by the Salvation Army in this region each year. The Lord Mayor says the salvos need the public's help.
There were 6,000 meals served out of this place during the earthquake emergency, and that's wonderful, but it somewhat overshadows the day-to-day work that's done here every day in getting meals and comfort and a warm bed for people who are in real distress. And the Salvation Army look after us. This is our opportunity to look after them.
Their $250,000 yacht, She's Apples, sank off Foster after losing its rudder. Bob Mott of Sydney and Jeff Ascot Evans of Mooloolaba managed to send a distress call before their emergency location beacon failed. Flares were spotted about 8 o'clock last night, 30 nautical miles off Port Stephens. The 2 men and their raft were taken on board the Newcastle police launch Intrepid and were returned to Newcastle at midnight.
What I would like to say is that the water police, they did a wonderful job in locating us, and they were very patient, and they were there for quite a long time before they could see our first flare, which we could only fire at after the sun went down.
The crew was met by the boat's owner from Sydney, who said he was thankful they were alive. Both men were experienced sailors and were delivering the boat from Brisbane to Sydney. The boat was insured and the crew returned to Sydney with the owner.
Nervous nights lie ahead for Wickham and Maryville residents. With the king tide due tomorrow night, they fear a repeat of the floods that washed through their homes only weeks ago.
I won't be sleeping. No. It's just, you get paranoid about it. You're lying there thinking all the time about water.
Do you think the water will come through here tomorrow?
Oh, yes. Yes. This is the first house it goes through.
There's nothing new about this problem. Long-time Wickham residents have lived with the fear of tidal floods since early this century. 72-year-old Betty Lindley remembers being evacuated from her home as a child. 70 years later, that prospect still exists.
Yes. I'm sorry.
What's happening here at Wickham is that the system designed to drain excess water is in fact causing the problem. When the tide rises, water from Thrasby Creek and the harbour floods stormwater pipes and spills onto the streets. In effect, the drainage system works in reverse. On the eve of another king tide, the Hunter Water Board is working to stem the flow. Today, makeshift gates were installed in stormwater channels in Annie Street and near Islington Park. When the tide rises, it will meet a barrier.
And if we keep our fingers crossed and it doesn't rain, the problem should be significantly less than what it was in the past.
But what if it does rain?
If it rains, we're in trouble. Basically, if you've got flows from both sides of your gates, basically means you end up with water in the streets and in the houses. So if it rains, and we can't do much about it.
In the event of a sudden downpour, the blocked drains would increase the risk of flooding. The plugs would then have to be removed. While the Hunter Water Board keeps its fingers crossed against rain, others are appealing to a higher authority.
Only praying that it don't happen.
Do you think prayers are enough?
Oh yeah, they help sometimes.
State and federal authorities are at odds over the thorny problem of how to ease congestion at Sydney Airport. Deputy Premier Wal Murray warns the federal government plans to press ahead with a surcharge scheme for peak hour arrivals and departures. While this would be a drop in the bucket for the big carriers, country commuter airlines would be seriously affected. Their options would be to increase fares or reschedule flights outside peak times. Either way, they risk losing business.
They're hoping that by putting the additional charges on, that it will deter people from travelling by air, therefore there won't be a demand for the operator to go to Sydney, therefore it resolves their problem.
Intrastate carriers are opposed to the levy system. Trevor England says the government would be addressing Sydney's congestion problem at the expense of the small airlines and their passengers. At this stage, it's not clear how high the proposed peak period levy would be, but Eastern Airlines estimates their Sydney to Newcastle fares would jump by 25% if the system is introduced. On that basis alone, the federal government is toying with an unpopular scheme, one that's fuelled scepticism among some in the industry.
I see the scheme basically as being a revenue-making exercise by the government in lieu of resolving the problem that we currently have in traffic congestion in Mascot.
But at least one organisation sees beyond the doom and gloom painted by the Deputy Premier. The Newcastle Chamber of Commerce says the prospect of peak hour levies at Mascot strengthens its case for a fast-track development of a regional airport at Williamtown.
It certainly adds weight to what we've been saying in the report, that Kingsford Smith is overcrowded and a solution from a Hunter region point of view is the upgrading of Williamtown.
The federal government remains non-committal. A spokesman for Aviation Support Minister Bob Collins says a peak hour levy is one of a number of options to address congestion at Mascot. He suggested Mr Murray's comments have more to do with his own political problems than the situation at Sydney Airport. Leslie Robinson for NBN News.
This seemingly harmless plant has the potential to put sheep or cattle farmers in real strife.
A kilo of it would kill 2 or 3 head of stock.
Green cestrum or deadly nightshade can be found on 80% of Hunter River properties. Singleton Weed Inspector Bill Pendred knows just how costly noxious weeds can be. On a hit list of more than 20 plants, this African boxthorn, if given its head, can destroy farmlands.
And we had a property in the Shire that had 40 acres of it that was so dense that a dog couldn't bark in it.
The state spends $500 million controlling noxious weeds. Throughout the hunter, inspectors like Bill monitor problems within their own shire. Now an investigative group under Councillor Ian Ether from Singleton Council has called for an Upper Hunter Weeds Authority to comprehensively fight the problem. This is why a unified approach to weed control is so essential. Seeds are dropped here into the hunter and carried downstream to infest neighbouring councils.
One person on a riverbank, say, is controlling their weeds and the neighbour upstream isn't doing so, then the other person is virtually doing the work for nothing.
As yet only Musselbrook, Scone and Singleton shires have given their support. Peter Ryan, NBN News. Operators of the Ragged Designs leather boutique on Crown Street arrived this morning to find the store ransacked. It's believed the thieves used the scaffolding around the earthquake-damaged block to screen them as they smashed the front window and entered the store unnoticed. Inside, muddy boot prints lead to a rear storeroom where the thieves collected about 30 jackets. On the way out, several more were snatched from racks in the display window. Manager John Scabata says the theft is another blow to the business, which, like many others, has suffered a decline in trade since the quake. He says the jackets bear distinctive labels and a unique cut.
Everybody wants a leather jacket, so it's very sellable. So, yeah, they've just gone for the jackets.
Scientific police made a detailed examination of the premises later in the day. At this stage, police are not prepared to rule out a link between this robbery and the theft of a similar number of leather jackets from the Roger David store in Charlestown Square in March. Those jackets were never recovered.
Illawarra's new recruit Patrick Fairs was right on target early. While Michael Johnson had an off night, Air Fairs was awesome. Recent solid performer for the Falcons, James Bullock, was again in the thick of the action. Greg Hubbard chimed in with a big three-pointer. And then to emphasise Newcastle's miserable night in the gong, Bullock and Lazard just couldn't find the bucket. But Man Mountain Lazard made the ring pay for not cooperating earlier. However, it was all to no avail as Illawarra turned up the tempo with superb teamwork to belt the hapless Falcons.